and welcome to the CDFM study group. My name is Helen Thomas. Today what I want to do is to go over the CDFM Module 4 exam. So that is the one that you can select for the acquisition portion of the CDFM certifications. So it's not required. You only need Module 1, 2, and 3 to earn your certification, but you have this additional exam for the acquisition piece that you can take. And I want to go over the test breakdown. So let me put this in slideshow mode, make it easier to see. So the CDFM Module 4, currently as of this brief, we are using the 2011 study guide. The American Society of Military Comptrollers is in the process of updating this material. Since they just updated Module 1, 2, and 3 to the 2018 information, they also are planning to update the Module 4. We do not have a timeline yet. Once that comes out, I'll present that here. So this is the test breakdown for CDFM Module 4. There are 10 chapters, 10 competencies, 10 sections. Chapter 1, which is your goal, strategy, and decision support, accounts for 11% of this exam. So it deals with DoD decision support systems, the goals, the strategy, and why we're entering into the acquisition process. Chapter 2, systems engineering, is 15%, and you can see the various topics. I'm not going to go into detail here because I'm going to have separate videos for each chapter to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to break down the information. Alright, Chapter 3, Resource Management. So some of these terms should be similar to what you learn in Module 1, 2, and 3. So this is 10% of the Module 4 exam, Resource Management. So if you notice, a lot of this portion, even though it's only 10%, a lot of this is you're going to have to do calculation, the earned value management, cost analysis. Chapter 4, Life Cycle Sustainment, is 8%. Chapter 5, Human Systems Integration, is making those systems possible to be integrated, to be used, to be sustained by individuals. Chapter 6 accounts for 7%. Acquiring Information Technology and National Security Systems. Technology Protection is Chapter 7, 5%. Chapter 8, Test and Evaluation. So you kind of think of the acquisition system going through from cradle, development, procurement, and so forth. Test and evaluation, 9%. Before we put it out there, we want to test it, evaluate it. Decisions, assessments, reports, Chapter 9, 11%. And one of the big areas, Chapter 10, Special Management Activities, is 19%. So this accounts for the test breakdown for the CDFM Module 4 acquisition exam, for those that are planning to take that. So that ends the breakdown. So what I'm going to do now is switch slides and kind of go over some of the key things I pulled out of Chapter 1. And I'm going to do that on this same video. So let's just open that. And of course, you know I like my slideshow mode. Alright, so CDFM Module 4.1, which is the first part, Chapter 1, deals with the DoD decision support system of goal, strategy, and decision support. So this is a recap of what we learned in Module 1, 2, and 3, because you got to remember there are 3 DoD support system, decision support systems. We talked about JCITS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System. And as you see here in the slide, oversight is done by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, who sits as the Chairman of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. This is exactly the same diagram, exactly the same information in Module 1, 2, and 3. So JCITS, after the National Security Strategy has been published, the DoD then needs to look at that big op order and determine what are the defense related things that we need to do. So JCIDS is It's an analytical process that is used to then determine if there are any capability gaps. You see here number one. So if you work with TRADOC, you've heard the term .mlpf here. So that means that JROC is analyzing doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership, and education, personnel, and facilities. They look at each one of those areas and see, yes, in order for us to meet the national security strategy, we have a capability gap. And then they look and see, is the issue in training? Maybe we need to up our training. So I highlighted the material because that's going to come into play in a little bit. So JSIDs identify capability gaps by evaluating, analyzing the .mlpf process. If it's just simply, okay, we need more personnel and we just need funding, we use the PPBE process: planning, programming, budgeting, and execution. So the Deputy Secretary of Defense has overall oversight of the P process. Going back to this material, the reason I highlighted it, because when you do the JSIDs, the .mlpf, is if the solution is a material solution, the material solution is what triggers this third system, the Defense Acquisition System. So the Undersecretary of Defense Acquisition Technology and Logistics has oversight. That's the senior acquisition person at the DoD level. And he's the chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board. And if you remember from Module 1, 2, and 3, that on the Defense Acquisition Board, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff also sits as co-chair on the Defense Acquisition Board, just to make sure that the wheels are turning, everything overlaps. So the acquisition, you either do your research to develop the item, or if you have something already in existence, you can enter the acquisition process in a single step. So all three systems overlap to develop the National Defense Strategy, the QDR. The reason I put Quadrennial Defense Review here is because since the Module 4 exam has not been updated, they may still be referring to QDR. The new study guides for Module 1, 2, and 3, the 2018 study guides, they got rid of the QDR and it's now called the National Defense Strategy. So I put both here just in case you see QDR or the National Defense Strategy. So that's the DoD decision support systems. All right, so quickly over the P process. Planning is controlled at the DoD level. Oversight by the USD for policy has responsibility for their planning. And I give you the process results and fiscally constrained, joint programming guidance, links between planning and programming. The final document in this phase is the Defense Planning Guidance, or it may also be called Defense Planning and Programming Guidance, is the planning document. So that's the last document that's published in the planning phase. Programming phase of P, the DCAPE has responsibility. Fiscally constrained. It starts with the development of the POM, Program Objective Memorandum. So we take that defense planning guidance or programming guidance, we are responding to it. Now we know this is what we need to do, but guess what? We don't have everything that's required, so we have to prioritize our resources within that fiscally constrained environment. So the joint programming guidance. So issues not resolved at lower levels, of course, they go to the SecDef for decision. The final document that is published in the programming phase is called a Resource Management Decision, the RMD. And the budgeting phase of P, the USD Comptroller has responsibility. This phase occurs concurrently. So at the same time that the programming phase is going on, you have one office in Congress deals with programming, you have another office that deals with budgeting. So they're not going through the same channel. So the budgeting phase occurs at the same time with the programming phase. All budget estimates are reviewed by USD Comptroller and the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. That's the resource manager for the executive branch. The budget projects resources 2 years into the future. The analyst reviews the estimates, prepare resource management decision. What I also wanted to add is the final document in this phase is the resource management decision, but you're also updating the comptroller information system with your information. And one additional database I don't want you to forget when you talk about, so execution is after Congress appropriates the money, the purpose to provide feedback. So over here, the DCAPE updates the future year defense program. So DCAPE, that's the same guy, the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, is updating the future year defense program, the DoD database that keeps track of all this moving pieces. All right, so we're going to look now at the defense acquisition system. Starts again with JSIDs, where we identify that the capability gap that we need to fix the problem, the solution to fix the problem is a material solution. So the user capability gap is identified here. And the JSIDs, which is done by the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, will then present an integrated, so actually they provide an initial capabilities document that tells, okay, this is what it's going to take to fix the problem. And then they go into material development decision. They want to know, okay, what's the plan? They have to go into the planning phase before you actually start going through the research problems. So material solution analysis, you have milestone A. So it actually goes from here, material development decision. So once this decision is made to proceed, you start doing your course of action analysis, material solution. We try to war game different things that can solve that capability gap through the material solution analysis. If we identify the technology, then milestone A, a decision is made to keep going by the milestone decision authority. Technology development, and you do your assessment. So this is considered to be the pre-systems acquisition portion. It is not until you get to milestone B that it becomes the formal program initiation point. So here we're just doing research, we're doing analysis to see if we want to go into this acquisition. We want to buy these items, we want to develop these items. So program initiation begins at milestone B. The third phase, so you got material solution analysis, technology development, and for the 2018 study guide, this is gonna change. So, but for this purposes, is technology development. The third phase after milestone B is engineering and manufacturing development. And then later on in chapter 2, we're going to look at exactly what happens at each one of these. After the engineering, manufacturing, development, you have milestone C. And just remember, at each one of these, you have their milestone decision authority will decide before you invest money and move on to the next phase. So after milestone C, you have production and deployment. The low rate initial program is determined. You're in, let me see, this is your IOC, initial operating capability. And so we're going to go through each one of these in the system acquisition. And then your full operational capability is done at the operations and support, which is part of your sustainment. So just the key thing here with the defense acquisition system, remember, material solution and the milestone decision authority, that's your senior acquisition person, whether it's at the DoD level or the service level, may authorize entry into any point of the acquisition system. So who or what are the roles and responsibilities of the milestone decision authority? At the DoD level, the milestone decision authority, that's the individual to approve moving forward in each one of those phases and milestones, is the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, USD AT&L. So some of his roles, which we've discussed: Senior DoD Acquisition Representative. Some of his titles: Defense Acquisition Executive of Major Defense Acquisition Programs, Major Automated Information Systems. So these are like your ACAT 1 Delta, your ACAT 1 AM. He's also the chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board, and those are for your general major programs. And then you have your IT stuff, Information Technology Acquisition Board. So you also have a board for your IT information technology stuff. So this says he may designate a CIO, Communication Information Officer, to sit over the IT board, which makes sense because he's a subject matter expert. Milestone Decision Authority for Acquisition category, and I said this already, 1 Delta, 1 AM programs. This is your Delta, meaning it's handled at DoD level, and this is your automation. What this is saying is each one of those boards, and I'll go ahead and click here, your DAB, the Defense Acquisition Board, and your Information Technology Acquisition Board, they all have what's called an overarching integrated product team. That's just a team of individuals that provide integrated assessments of the program issues. They're the worker bees here, your working OIPT that does all the analysis and then provides their recommendation to the Defense Acquisition Board. Then they take the information and they advise the Milestone Decision Authority. Goals and strategy. So in the technology development strategy and acquisition strategy, just think about strategy. That means how we're going to do things. So there's two of them. You have the technology development strategy and acquisition strategy that's developed by your program manager. When in doubt, just pick program manager as the individual who gives you the baseline, the starting numbers, the objectives, the thresholds. Everything comes from the program manager because they're the subject matter expert. Just remember that. So the TDS and the AS guide the process and addresses requirements supporting the development. The purpose of the technology development: reduce technology risks, determine appropriate technologies, demonstrate critical technologies on your prototypes. So before you do a full-fledged, remember we talk about initial operational capability, we don't want to have developed all the items before we determine, oh, it doesn't work. So we're going to develop prototypes to test, to reduce technology risk, to make sure that everything works before we do a full-on development of those items. So technology development strategy is the strategy guides that effort to the technology development. Makes sense? And then acquisition strategy just guides the remaining phases we just looked at. So remember, technology development happened at phase number 2, and then after milestone A, and then you go into milestone B. So presented and approved at milestone B, where you go into your formal acquisition process. Acquisition approach defines the approach to be used. So remember I talked about when it comes to the defense acquisition system, you can either enter through evolutionary method, meaning we start from the beginning, or if there's something already, maybe it's a commercial item that's already on the shelf that all we need to do is tweak it in some manner, then it may be a single step. So maybe we enter into milestone B right away because we already have something out there. So all it evolves over time. So evolutionary or single step. Then you also have, so you have your TDS and AS, and then you have your acquisition program baseline. The program manager again is the one. So these are your objectives, where he established your objectives and thresholds for your development. You need a starting point to know, okay, what kind of cost, how much things cost, what is it supposed to be able to do. So your PM again will develop the acquisition program baseline. This just gives you the law per 10 U.S. Code 2435. DoD may not obligate funds for major defense programs after it enters engineer and manufacturing without the Milestone Decision Authority approving the baseline. So remember, I talked about before you move to a phase, before you do anything else, before you spend any money, the MDA must approve. Joint staff reviews costs, schedule, and key performance in acquisition program baseline for Joint Requirements Oversight Council program. So you just mean those at the DoD level, you got to review costs. So you look at cost risk, because you don't, if they say, hey, I estimate at 1 million and now it's costing me 5 million, we got a problem. Schedule, if the work is supposed to be done by February and now we're in May, we've got a problem. And key performance, if it's supposed to do A, B, and C and it's not only doing A and B, then we have a performance issue. And then trade space is the difference between the objective and the threshold. All right, so that concludes, that's all chapter 1 of the CDFM Module 4, which is your goal, strategy, and decision support. So I'm going to develop a different video for the chapter 2 and so forth, because it's a little bit more information. So thank you again. Be sure to subscribe, and so that you'll get notifications once I add the additional videos.